Have you ever really stopped to think about how anything can survive in the coldest places on our planet? I mean, we're talking about the highest glaciers, the deepest polar oceans, places where ice is just the enemy. It expands, it pierces cell walls, it basically sucks the life-giving water right out of you. And yet, life finds a way. Today, we're going to dive into one of the most incredible stories of survival you've ever heard.
Just think about that for a second. This isn't some rare fluke found in one or two weird creatures. Nope. This is a strategy that pops up all across the tree of life, from the absolute smallest microbes you can imagine, all the way up to complex animals. It is, without a doubt, one of evolution's most brilliant and widespread inventions.
And that right there, that is the big question, isn't it? How on earth does it work? Well, the answer is so much cooler than you'd think. It's a story that involves these tiny molecular machines, powerful biochemical cocktails, and survival strategies that honestly seem to defy the very laws of biology.
All right, first things first. To really get this, we have to completely forget about the kind of antifreeze you might be familiar with. You know, the stuff you put in your car. What's happening inside a polar fish or a winter insect is playing a totally different ballgame. Yeah, the difference is huge. Car antifreeze is basically a brute force approach. You just dump a whole bunch of chemicals in to lower the freezing point of the water. It works, but it's not exactly elegant. Biological antifreeze, on the other hand, is all about surgical precision. It doesn't have to change the freezing point of all the water in an animal's body. Instead, it plays defense on a microscopic level, stopping ice crystals before they can even get started. And this is the secret weapon that makes it all happen. We're talking about these highly specialized molecules called, you guessed it, antifreeze proteins. You can think of them as these tiny microscopic bodyguards constantly patrolling the fluids of an organism, always on the lookout for the first deadly seed of an ice crystal. So what these amazing proteins do is create this really bizarre physical state called thermal hysteresis. Okay, let me break that down. Imagine the temperature outside drops below freezing, let's say to -1 Celsius. Normally, any water would start turning to ice, right? But with these proteins on the job, absolutely nothing happens. The moment a microscopic ice seed forms, these proteins find it and literally latch onto its surface. They physically block any other water molecules from joining in. So the freezing point gets pushed way, way down, but the melting point stays exactly the same. It creates the safety gap, this buffer zone, where the water is technically supercooled and life just carries on like nothing's wrong. So, now that we get the basic science, let's go on a little tour of our planet and see who's actually using this incredible tech. And we're going to start with the true pioneers of antifreeze, the microbes.
For the longest time, we thought places like glaciers, permafrost, and sea ice were totally sterile, totally lifeless. Turns out, we were dead wrong. They are teeming with a whole world of bacteria, algae, and fungi. And they survive because they cook up their own ice-binding proteins. Some of them pump these proteins out into their environment to create a little safe liquid zone around themselves, while others keep them inside to protect their own delicate cellular machinery from getting shredded by ice.
And this quote just says it all. This was a complete paradigm shift for science. The moment researchers found bacteria in Antarctica living inside solid ice, everything changed. Their antifreeze proteins literally carve out these microscopic pockets of liquid water, a little life-sustaining oasis inside a frozen world. It forced us to see that ice isn't necessarily a wall where life stops. For some, it's home.
Now, it's not just microbes. Let's move up the complexity ladder and look at the plant kingdom. I mean, a plant can't exactly run south for the winter, right? It has to stay put and endure the cold. And many cold-hardy plants, like winter grains, have evolved to produce their own antifreeze proteins as the cold weather sets in. But their goal isn't to stop freezing completely. It's to control it.
And to do that, they deploy this entire survival toolkit. It's amazing. First, the antifreeze proteins actually guide the ice formation, making sure it only happens in the spaces between the cells, where it's much less dangerous. At the same time, they flood the inside of their cells with sugars like sucrose, which acts as a natural cryoprotectant. And finally, they produce these stress proteins called dehydrins, which help protect the cell's structure as water is pulled out of it by the ice outside. It's like this beautiful, complex biochemical ballet that lets plants like winter wheat survive for months while being almost completely frozen.
All right, now for the animals that really made antifreeze famous, the incredible fish of the polar oceans. For them, the cold isn't a seasonal problem, it is a constant, relentless threat. This number right here, this is the whole story. This is the temperature where the salt water around these fish turns into solid ice. It's a number that should be a death sentence.
And here's the kicker.
A normal fish's blood is less salty than the ocean, so it actually freezes at a much warmer temperature, around minus zero point 0.8 Celsius. This means these polar fish are literally swimming around day in and day out in a liquid that is colder than their own freezing point. It's a biological paradox. Any tiny ice crystal that gets into their body, maybe through their gills or their food, should trigger an immediate, catastrophic flash freeze. So, how in the world do they pull it off?
Well, they do it by loading up their blood with a special kind of antifreeze molecule called an antifreeze glycoprotein. These things are constantly circulating, acting like a microscopic security force. The second an ice crystal dares to enter the bloodstream, they swarm it, latch onto its surface, and stop it dead in its tracks. It's an unbelievably effective defense system, and it's the reason entire ecosystems are able to thrive in the icy waters of the Arctic and Antarctic.
Now, as amazing as those fish are, if we were handing out Olympic gold medals for antifreeze production, they would absolutely go to the insects. They've taken this technology and pushed it to a level of power and complexity that is just staggering.
Just take a look at the snow flea. This tiny little thing, hopping around on snowbanks in the dead of winter, produces some of the most powerful antifreeze proteins ever discovered. Scientists call them hyperactive because they can stop ice from growing at temperatures way colder than what those polar fish can handle. They create a massive gap between the freezing point and the melting point. But, a lot of insects don't just rely on one trick. They mix up a powerful chemical cocktail for survival. They'll combine these super potent antifreeze proteins with huge amounts of other stuff, like glycerol and sorbitol. These are cryoprotectants that act like a thick, protective syrup inside their cells, preventing them from dehydrating and getting damaged as the temperature plummets.
And all of this allows them to do something that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction. Many insects can literally freeze solid. First, their body produces all these protective chemicals. Then, their heart stops beating. They stop breathing. Ice crystals literally fill their body cavities. For all intents and purposes, they are in a state of suspended animation. And then, when spring finally arrives, they just thaw out. Their systems restart, and they walk away completely unharmed. It's got to be one of the most extreme forms of survival on the entire planet.
Okay, so everything we've talked about so far is about fighting ice, right? Preventing it, stopping it. But what if you didn't fight it? What if instead you just learned how to embrace it? Well, that brings us to a totally different, but just as mind-blowing survival strategy.
Everybody, meet the master of this technique, the North American wood frog. This little amphibian doesn't bother with super powerful antifreeze proteins. It has a much bolder plan for getting through the winter. And just look at this. It's a staggering transformation. As winter closes in, up to 70% of the water in the wood frog's body turns to solid ice. It literally becomes a block of frozen tissue, a little frogsicle, with only a small bit of water left in a liquid state, concentrated safely inside its cells. So here's how it does it. The second its skin feels the touch of ice, it triggers a massive emergency release of glucose from its liver. It floods its cells with so much sugar that the water inside becomes like a thick syrup, which protects the cells from dehydrating and collapsing. And then, everything just stops. Its heart stops beating, its brain activity completely ceases. It is clinically dead. But when spring comes, the most incredible thing happens. It begins to thaw from the inside out. The heart gives a little kickstart, and within a few hours, it's hopping away to go find a mate. It's unbelievable.
Now, it's really important to get the distinction here. The frog's game plan is not antifreeze, it's freezing tolerance. It's a completely separate evolutionary answer to the exact same problem of surviving winter. It's not about preventing ice, it's about managing it.
And honestly, the list of these cold-adapted survivors just goes on and on. We've talked about the famous examples, but the icy oceans are filled with other, quieter survivors that are all using these same molecular tools to get by.
We find these kinds of proteins in Antarctic sea urchins, in clams that live right up against the sea ice, and even in krill. And the krill are a perfect example of why this matters on a huge scale. These tiny little crustaceans are the absolute base of the entire Antarctic food web. Their ability to survive brushing up against ice using these proteins is what supports all the penguins, the seals, and the whales that depend on them. You're talking about an entire ecosystem that is built on this one microscopic defense mechanism.
So, let's zoom out for a second. What's the big takeaway here? When you see the same incredible trick appearing in so many different, unrelated species, well, it tells you something really profound about how evolution actually works. This is a textbook example of what biologists call convergent evolution. Think about it. The fish in the Arctic and the fish in the Antarctic have been separated by millions of years of evolution, yet they both came up with antifreeze proteins.
And they did it using completely different ancestral genes. The reason this solution keeps getting invented is because it's just so incredibly good. Proteins are the perfect tool for the job. They can be shaped with atomic precision to fit perfectly onto the surface of an ice crystal, like a key fitting into a lock, and physically stop its growth in a way no simple chemical ever could.
And this quote just nails it. The problem, the deadly threat of ice, is this constant, powerful pressure. And under that pressure, evolution, working through natural selection, has independently stumbled upon the same elegant molecular solution over and over and over again. It proves that this is one of the best answers nature has for surviving the cold. And understanding this incredible natural technology has some huge implications for us. We're now studying these proteins to try and improve how we cryopreserve human organs for transplant, which could give surgeons much longer to perform life-saving operations. We're looking at using them in medicine to protect cells during freezing. Heck, they can even be used to make your ice cream better by preventing those big, crunchy ice crystals from forming. And of course, they give us a blueprint for what to look for when we search for life beyond Earth.
And that really brings us to the final thought, doesn't it? The very existence of antifreeze proteins here on Earth proves that life can find a way to thrive in frozen environments. It gives us a recipe for survival. So as our telescopes and probes look out to the icy moons in our own solar system, places like Europa or Enceladus, we have to ask ourselves, if life ever got started there, facing an endless global winter, what kind of incredible molecular solutions might it have invented?